Welcome back to Hear Me Out, Just a Thought, where we seek wisdom together through many, many things: current events, faith, politics, internet trends, much, much more. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe and join the conversation. We do keep it real, we do keep it honest. Today, I want to talk about something that is all over social media right now and has been all over social media and conversations, real life conversations for the past, I would say, 5 to 10 years. And it's the idea of being a high value woman, quote unquote, high value woman. And I've seen this pop up in the last few years. The equivalent for men is also in conversations. I am interested about it. And I want to talk about, if we're honest, how when people say that, right, high value woman, high value man, they're usually talking about a woman who has the looks, the money or the resources, the independence, a woman that knows how to play the game and strategize in a smart way to get whatever she wants, and most times also to get a man. But is that what it really means to be a high value woman? So let's challenge that a bit today, and let's look at what it actually means to be a high value woman, pardon me. And I want to also contrast the world slash the social media and online perspective versus a biblical perspective, because surprise, surprise, God's idea of value is usually the complete opposite of the world's. And so I want to know who wins. Who wins? Is it God or is it the world? Who gives the best advice? So stick around, hear me out. It's just a thought. Okay, so the value, right, of a high value woman, I understand it as one's worth, what we are worth as women. Are we worth something? Are we worth nothing? Am I high value? Are you high value? How do we understand our worth? And I think the world, and when I say the world, I'm talking about people that have influence over the youth, over women, over men. Most times I will mention social media because, as you may have found out, there is a lot of conversation online that has impact on how people behave. There is a lot of accounts that talk about these topics that have massive, massive followings and engagement from young people, from not so young people, and that should show us what people are actually thinking and seeking. And so I have seen these accounts talk about how, as women, again, the equivalent exists for men, but I'm focusing on women today, is the message that the woman needs to secure the bag, pardon. You have probably heard of boss babe or boss up or level up, how to be a 10, how to level up to be a 10, how you can get what you want, how you can manipulate this man so he can be in love with you. I have seen so much of this, and I have taken time to actually go and listen to hours and hours of content about this, written as well as just videos online, social media, and things like that, because I am interested in such topics. I do want to know how to become a high value woman, or at least I was really, really interested in that topic when I started consuming that material. And I have opinions. I want to hear yours as well. What I can gather and what I can say right now is that I have found that it's a lot about the external value that we have as women. It's about how we look, right? And how we can update our look, how we can appear a certain way, appear high class, appear richer, appear like we are wealthy. How we can be seductive in our mannerisms and our clothing to attract men. It's also about what we own. There's a lot of accounts about buying this or that to be in trend with the season, with fashion, with other people that are called, I've seen videos, what are those called? I think it's like how to look rich with owning like bags and shoes and things like that are a certain color, a certain material. It's also about who we can manipulate. For example, like I've mentioned at the top of the episode, it's, can you play mind games to manipulate this man or that man or other people around you into respecting you, into thinking you are worthy and high value? And so let me know if you agree with this or disagree, but I did kind of gather that it was a lot about external value. And so I want to contrast all of that with a biblical perspective. If you are new here, I will also add a note, pardon me. If you are not into Christianity, if you're not into the Bible, if you're an atheist, a non-believer, and you're like, what does this have to do with me? Why should I be interested in all of this? My take is that if you are interested in growing, in becoming better, wiser, in living a life that is healthy and good and wholesome and intentional, there isn't any better advice out there than the Bible. That is what I argue on my channel. That is what I have tested, tried, tested, and true. And this is what I'm here to push on you today. So stick around so I can show you my argument, or I guess build my argument for the Bible. I honestly do think that the Bible is a great advice book for all of us, believers and non-believers. I will also argue that the Christian perspective is the best worldview. And so if you have missed previous episodes on why that is, you can tour my channel and find the content where I argue that. So if you're a non-believer, please, you are welcome to stay. Getting back into it, so I talked about how it's all external value from what I have gathered online. But if we dive into the word in the book of Proverbs, and again, if you're new here, I talk about Proverbs probably on every episode. It is my favorite book of the Bible because of the wisdom that is in there. It's such a gem. The whole Bible is fantastic, of course, in terms of advice and recommendations and just obvious truth here, but Proverbs is my personal favorite. And then for Christians, you have guessed that I'm going to mainly talk about Proverbs 31. This chapter, it inspires me, but it also slaps me every day because it tells me what I should be. And sometimes I'm like, I'm not all of that just yet. But it's such encouragement to know that we have something to model our lives on. And Proverbs 31 is an excellent guide for women, for high value women. And so I want to read on verse 30, right? Proverbs 31:30, about external versus internal value, pardon me. So Proverbs 31:30 says, charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting. I think in some translations, it's beauty is vain, pardon. Continue reading. It says, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. And so this is a contract. So if you think about it, the whole boss babe narrative is designed to make us chase our value. I'll repeat, it is designed to make us chase our value through our own effort, through what we can achieve, through how attractive we can appear. And again, it's all good, right? It's good for you to be attractive. It's good for you to take care of your body and your hygiene. Your body is a temple. The Bible teaches us that. But in terms of value, we learn here from Proverbs 31:30 that our value does not come from all of that. God says that our value is rooted in Him specifically. And the reason I want to argue that this is true is that if we follow the worldly advice that our value is rooted in things that we can acquire, buy, in ways we can look, in who we can manipulate, all of those things, right? The looks and the money and the status, those are things that can fade, that can go away, that can disappear, that can diminish, that are not secure, is what I'm trying to say. And so if our value is rooted in things that can fade, then our value can also fade. And that's not high value if you ask me. I can't be high value Monday and low value Friday. I can't be high value when it's the season, the fashion season, where I do have the clothes to fit the current trend, and then be low value when I don't have those clothes. I can't be high value when I am in a relationship or married, and be low value when I'm single. I can't be high value when I have people praising me and saying how amazing I am, and low value when no one is doing that, because that teaches me, and I guess you and young women and young girls, that value is something that comes from what other people think. And we're smart enough on this channel, we're wise enough, I guess, to know instinctively that that is not true. But in case we needed validation, in case we just needed confirmation, there is a God that says, hey, your value is rooted in me. And so when you know God, when you follow God's principles, which here is talked about, a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised, you already have access to a value that no one can take away. No one can take away your value. And so I want to argue that if more people knew this, if more women knew that we are not valuable because of things outside of us, but we are inherently valuable because of a God that says we're made in his image, no one can take that away from us. And if we even transpose that to social media itself and online presence, how many of us know and have witnessed and have seen how fast social media, I guess, influencers or personalities come and go, and they become, adored, and then the next day they become canceled, and then they have to constantly keep relevant. They have to constantly talk about things that are relevant to other people, or else they get forgotten. And they feel pressure to maintain their appearance a certain way, or their online status a certain way to stay relevant. So if you compare that to a woman who lives just confidently in who she is, who does not necessarily chase likes or validation or attention or opportunities to be shown online, but just secure in God's love, that is a high contrast, and the latter is preferable. It is preferable for us not to stress about keeping value and recognize the truth of God, that is, you are already valuable because you are my child and you are made in that image, and you are important, so important that I did send my son for you. And that is a whole nother topic. If you're interested, go find that content on my channel. But I do think there's a high contrast here about if we were to answer the question, where does our value come from? And so I guess I can say that a high value woman knows her worth that comes from God, and not necessarily is putting all her money on her ability to impress other people by her looks or status or money or attention. It's just better that way. But what do you think, right? That's my first sort of like argument for the biblical perspective versus the world. I do think the world loses this battle when it comes to advising women on how to be high value. But again, let me know what you think, especially if you're a non-Christian, non-believer, atheist, skeptic, whatever you want to call this. Let me know what you think of this proposition of mine. Now, also, when it comes to content that talks about being high value, I've also noticed a second thing, which is you are considered to be high value also if you listen to the advice of you are self-sufficient, you don't need anyone, you can do all things, you don't depend on other people, or more specifically, you don't depend on a man. So this is slightly a little bit pushing it over, because either you're told, hey, you have to manipulate men, or at least get away and play mind games to get a man to do everything for you, or you have to make sure that you don't depend on a man, which is a little bit of the more feminist, modern feminist approach. And so we hear things like be independent, don't need anyone. And independence isn't wrong in itself, right? It's good for you to be able to do things for yourself. I do subscribe to that. You should know how to work if you have to work. You should know how to drive a car. You should know how to do paperwork for yourself if you're an adult. You should be able to cook for yourself. You should be able to do all of these things. So independence is not wrong, but self-centered independence can lead to bad things. If we follow the advice that we don't need anybody, we can rely on ourselves and we're boss babes, and we don't need men and we don't need our family members, and we're just to work in silence and level up in silence as the narrative is telling us to do, it can lead to just us isolating ourselves, or even worse, getting so proud, getting into just pride in general, because we are convinced that we can do all things by ourselves. Now, for Christians, we already know that the answer is no. There are things we can't do just by ourselves, from our nature, from our flesh, from our inclinations, from our personalities and weaknesses, and just the truth that there is a God from whom we're not supposed to be separated. Again, that's another story for another time. But even if we only look at the worldly advice, when you push it to self-centered independence and pushing people away because we don't need them, it can lead, as I said, to isolation and just pride. And so let's contrast that. Let's contrast that with what a biblical perspective about the relationship we have with other people could be. And if we stay, there's a lot of advice in the Bible for that, specifically how our relationships should be. But I'm going to stay in Proverbs 31 because, again, this is a chapter that is literally about, a high value woman. So I'll stick to Proverbs 31. So on verse 20, it says, she opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. Again, if this whole chapter is teaching us how to be a high value woman, and it mentions what the relationships we should have look like, and also what kind of a blessing we as women should be to other people, it is for a reason. If you are a high value, quote unquote, woman from the world that is a boss babe, that is independent, that has money, that has the looks and has a man, but you are, for lack of a better word, useless to your community, useless to your family, useless to people who need you, useless to the needy and the poor, as they call it in the Bible, but really useless. I don't know how much of a high value we are if we are that type of woman, because true strength, or true, value is not about not needing anyone. I think it's about having the strength and the willingness and the heart to serve other people, to pour out and to build up and to lift others when it costs us something sometimes. I can think of examples of women that in my head, the women that I think are so valuable, or that I admire, or that I used to think in my youth when I was a kid and a young woman, I want to be like her when I grow up. They were not women who were independent, quote unquote, or who didn't help anybody. They were women, who were nice and kind and generous, and who helped me or helped my family or helped their community, who were building up other people and not self-centered, who were open to conversations and open to giving advice, who were blessings to other people. And so to be just pretty and rich and independent, yeah, sure, it feels nice, but it's not useful for the world. And so the value that you have in itself, what is it for, really? If you're not at all contributing to anything at all, then I'm not sure that it is high value. If you disagree, let me know in the comments. It makes me think of shoes. Stay with me. I'm going somewhere with this. It makes me think of shoes. So I love shoes. I'm a shoe person. I don't like necessarily makeup or like, I don't know, clothes or nails, all of that. But I like shoes. I really like shoes, and I like high heels. And there is such a shoe. Every woman knows this. There is such a shoe that is beautiful, like a high heel, that is beautiful, that is stunning to look at, that probably costs hundreds and thousands of dollars, and that you can see that it looks nice. You can see, if I had this on my foot, I could walk around and the world would be mine, because everyone would be like, wow, look at that shoe. And I would be trendy and fashionable because that shoe is the shoe. But we also know that some of these shoes are not wearable. If you were to try and walk in these shoes, so just exist with the shoe on, you wouldn't be able to walk, because they're not made necessarily to fit your foot or to fit your everyday life or to fit in normal activities such as either going to the office or even going to a wedding or a function, or just going to a restaurant on a date with the man that you supposedly manipulated into being fully in love with you and crazy in love with you. So that shoe, it might look wonderful, but is it valuable? Is it a shoe that in itself is valuable, or is it a shoe that is kind of useless? What happens to that shoe when the fashion trends goes away? What happens to that shoe when the brand that it is, because sometimes people buy shoes to like display them somewhere. So what happens when that brand gets canceled or, gets into a controversy that has to kind of diminish its value? What happens to the shoe that you bought, I don't know, $600 today? In 5-10 years, that shoe, how much is it worth then? And also, how does that shoe compare to the shoe that looks good for sure, feels wonderful in your feet, is durable or sturdy? Is that a word that I can use on shoes? Sturdy? I don't know. What happens to that first shoe when you compare it to the second shoe? You will realize that the second shoe is high value because it is a functional shoe and it's pretty and you can walk in it, and maybe it didn't break your bank account. The second shoe is valuable because it's actually a contribution for it. It's a blessing for your foot, right? And so again, I'm talking about shoes, but you can apply it to whatever you want to apply it to. The high value component of a woman also comes with, how is she a blessing to people around her? Is she self-centered / independent, or is she a blessing to people around her? Same for a man, I would say. And so I think I don't need anybody and I am independent culture versus somebody who knows her strength and skills, but chooses to be a blessing to those around her, her friends, her community, her family, her man, younger women, etc. There's food for thought there, because I think being high value biblically means also just being a blessing and not self-absorbed. You tell me. Okay. And when it comes to, I guess, the whole approach of playing mind games, of making sure that you attract this man or that man or stay on his mind. I've seen so much content about this. Stay on his mind, make him never forget you, make him obsessed by you. Things like those. I realize it is all about mind games. And I'm going to spoil this little rant I'm about to go on, but your value shouldn't be based on mind games. I think our value should not be based on mind games. That rings as bizarre to me. And so I've heard about, ghost him or reply to him only after 3 days, play hot and play cold. play with with his emotions to gain control, put down other women in some kind of way. But in terms of what comes out of our mouths and text or thumbs, I guess, because we text, what do we text with? Thumbs? Yeah, thumbs. If we contrast it to the simple advice in the same book of Proverbs, in the same chapter 31, that says that I'll say it the way it says it, she speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. Wisdom. Wisdom is knowing that you don't need to play mind games. Wisdom is knowing that the person who will be interested in you will be interested because you're interesting and not because you have manipulated your relationship with them to have attention. Wisdom is a woman knowing that we can use our words to build, to what do you call this? To, I guess, assert our needs or talk about our needs, but not to manipulate, right? Wisdom is for a woman to understand that if you have to fight for attention, you'll have to fight to keep that attention from a man, for example. And you don't want to live that kind of life if you are high value. Again, the shoe that is highly valuable, it won't have to remind you that it exists. You will naturally go grab that shoe when you're about to go out because it looks good and you can wear it. It doesn't have to be right in your face for you to remember. You know what needs to be right in your face for you to remember it exists? The display shoe that you bought only because it looks good. And so a high value woman does not need to remind people and play games and fight for attention. She is highly valuable, so people will seek her out. People will be interested in her. And so I guess, understanding that having influence or having attention is not about controlling people, but impacting people. I'll put a pause here for us to just digest this. It's not about controlling people. It's about impacting people. And I have learned this also. When I was younger, I remember in my teenage years thinking about these things, right? How, like, will a boy like me? Will I have, friends? Will I have many friends? Will I have few friends? I remember thinking about all of these things. And I was very fortunate to have women around me that were just great models of womanhood and high value femininity, call it what you want. And the one thing they had in common 100% of the time was they impacted other people in a great way. And so, like I mentioned, the ability that we might have to play games, to play mind games, may get us attention, but wisdom, actual wisdom, will gain us respect. And the value will then be also in the eyes of people who look at us. And so I think if we just isolate the whole dating mind game thingy, the online advice that is to play hard or just get a man to chase us versus just having the quiet confidence of a woman who knows her value and also communicates honestly, I think we're better off choosing honesty and integrity and maintaining good relationships and choosing to be a blessing to other people versus manipulation to make people fall in love with us, according to the world. So that's that. And I talked about femininity too, because I guess parallel to the whole high value woman content, there is also this whole femininity talk online. I'm sure you have heard it, seen it, participated in it or not, but it's out there. People are talking about what it is to be a feminine woman, a masculine man, what is toxic masculinity, what is toxic femininity, how to appear and sound and be feminine versus how to appear and sound and be masculine, all of that. And I think we can just think about, all right, here's what the word is telling us. Have this type of voice, walk this way, wear these clothes, have this kind of relationship with men and women and all of that. But can we just quickly compare it to the femininity that is in the Bible? this time around, I want to talk about First Peter, because there's a very popular verse that should be on every woman's mind in my opinion, and it's First Peter in chapter 3 and on verse 3 that says, "Your beauty should not come from outward adornment, rather it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight." Now, I know the world will say, why do I have to be, gentle and quiet? Why am I required to be gentle and quiet to be beautiful, quote unquote, from a biblical perspective? It does talk about how it's of great worth in God's sight. And I do think it also has to do with trying to scream that we're beautiful, trying to ask and demand for attention versus just being, which is a part of the femininity content online. It also emphasizes a lot about the being versus the doing. And so I agree with that. I tend to agree with that advice online. That is a call for us to look at who we are as people, to look at what are our inherent traits as women, and to focus on those and not so much put the value of what we can do. It might be a contrast to when I was talking about being a blessing to other people, but you're not a blessing because you give $5,000 to the next person. You're also a blessing because you can listen to them, that you can help them out, that you can lift them up, that you're generous with your time or with your advice or whatever. So it's not so much about can you do something for me, but what kind of person are you? And the inherent traits of a woman, I would argue, don't come from thin air and magic, but they come from God, right? And so I guess the influencer culture or the online culture that sometimes thrives on external beauty to appear feminine, and also a provocative sometimes behavior or a deceitful behavior of you're not actually like this, but you're required to act as if you are like this to be feminine. That can be contrasted with the dignity and the true beauty of a woman whose inner character speaks louder than her looks. And again, not knocking on looks. I don't want the takeaway here to be like, go be ugly. That's not what I'm saying. We're all able to present ourselves in a beautiful manner, take care of ourselves, mind our hygiene. And it is biblical to think that way. The body is a temple, but not to place everything on looks and things that are, I guess, shallow or that could fade. So character over appearance most times. I will also note that most of us know that when somebody is beautiful inside, they appear more beautiful outside as well. It's cliche, but it's also true. Yeah. And so then let me also add something about just the relationship with God. If God is telling us that our value is rooted in Him, if Proverbs 31 is teaching women all over the world that they will be high value when they fear the Lord, meaning when they submit to God, we have to talk about submission then, the submission to God. I have made a whole episode about submission. You can find it somewhere on the channel and revisit that conversation. But it is important to talk about not only just thinking, well, I'm valuable because I'm in the image of God, end of story, but also if I fear God, if I participate in a life that God rules, I then am a high value woman. And I know that society cringes, and I mean cringes, at the idea of submission. It's seen as a weakness. It's seen as a patriarchal arm. It's seen as being a doormat and being bullied into a certain submission. But that's not it. So again, if you have missed my episode about submission, go ahead and find that. I think it would be interesting for you and anyone who has this bad opinion of submission. It stems from also a marital relation between a man and a woman. But I'm here to say that submission to God is not weakness. It's the way to go. It's the blueprint to actual happiness. It's the blueprint to actual success. It's protecting you from a lot of errors and mistakes and regrets. It's protecting you from a lot of manipulation from other people, whether it be the opposite sex or friendships or family. It's the blueprint to how to grow as a person. It's the blueprint on how to manage your money and manage your home and manage your marriage and manage your work. Every single thing. And so submission to God goes hand in hand with being high value, because if you just turn away from God and his principles, that's when you have to play games. That's when we have to listen to content online teaching us the basics of how to get people to like us. When we stray away from God's design for us, that's when we feel a void. That's where we need to follow influencers, whether male or female, telling us how to act and be and what to buy and how to look like in order to have basic love and respect from other people. It's us talking about these things online for hours and hours and hours and hours and never really knowing how to apply it. And so I think submission to God is very, very important when we are having a conversation about being high value. And so the biblical submission is not oppression. It's really not oppression. It's just a choice rooted in strength and in love. And it's an intelligent choice. I would argue this until I die. It's actually an intelligent choice to submit to God. And again, I also talked about the marriage submission from the woman in that episode, so you can go and look at all that. So I think the narrative of I'm independent, I'm this, I can do all things is also bad when it pushes you to be independent from God, because we know that a submissive woman, a woman who submits to God, is not a demand. Why we all have free will, but I think it's a smart choice if you're going the route of being a high value woman. And I'll end on this. I'll say that if you look online, social media, YouTube, Facebook, whatever, and you seek out the content makers that talk about these topics, right? How to be a high value man, a high value woman, you will find that they have huge followings. Thousands of people are subscribed to their channels. Thousands and millions of people listen to their podcasts and read their books and all of that. And that should tell us something. That should tell us that we are all wondering about these things. We're all hungry for guidance on these things. We're all seeking to connect with people so that we can know and have tips and tricks and hacks on how to become valuable people. That should tell us that inside of us, we know that we need guidance. We know that there is some type of a void that needs to be filled with good advice. We are looking to feel valuable because we want to be high value women and men. And so I will, conclude this episode by reminding everyone that the truth is we were never, ever meant to be without God. We were never meant to be without guidance. We were never meant to be without a wise parent, I should say. We were never meant to figure this all out by ourselves. And if you have missed the episode I made about a fantastic book called Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, there is a passage in there that explains all of this, that explains how we were never meant to be separated from God. And so I think I did make an episode about that book or that passage specifically. You can go and find it, or maybe I'll link it. But this is confirmed by all of these eyeballs on these videos, all of these eyeballs on these social media accounts, all of this talk about how to be a high value person tells us that we are all looking for some type of feeling that we are enough. And I just so happen to know that there's a God that answers that question, and there's a God that is willing to be with us, by us at all times, the way it was initially supposed to be. So I guess if you want more of this type of conversation, if it has piqued your curiosity a little bit on God, what God has to offer you, stick with me so we can explore all of this, unpack it, and keep the challenge going of God versus the world. If you did find this valuable, I want you to share it with someone who needs to hear it, or even drop your thoughts. Maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you're like, no, I hear you, Gigi, but this is not it for me. Let me know your thoughts. What do you think defines a high value woman today, or even a high value man? Do you agree with the biblical perspective, or is it a struggle for you to accept all of this, especially the submission part? So let's talk about it. Make sure to like this video to let me know it was useful to you, and again, subscribe so we can stick together. And you know what, hit the bell notification. For now, I'm not very consistent just yet in putting out videos because life is life. I should probably become consistent on this. I'll try to post like on Mondays. How about that? But because I don't want to overpromise, hit the bell so that you get notified when actually I do put an episode out. I will see you next time.